Is it true that Michael Douglas said to you on your first date that he would be the father of your children?
Yes, he did.
And what did you say?
No. Did you? No.
And then you filed a restraining order?
You just think about that for 2 minutes.
Out beyond the winding mountain roads above Valdemosa, on the sun-scorched cliffs of Mallorca's northwest coast, there is an estate that has been standing since 1867. The olive trees are old enough to remember the Archduke who built it. The terraces drop toward the Mediterranean in long, unhurried steps, and on any given summer afternoon, if you listen carefully over the sound of the sea and the cicadas, you might hear two of Hollywood's most celebrated people simply living, not performing, not chasing, just living. This is Sestaca, and this is where Michael Douglas and Catherine Zeta-Jones finally found the version of their lives that fits. Before there was a coastal estate, before there were olive groves and sea views, and the particular silence that only the Mediterranean delivers at dusk, there were two separate lives, each brilliant, each turbulent, each moving at the speed that fame demands. To understand how they ended up here, together, unhurried, choosing the view over the red carpet, you first have to understand the noise they came from. Michael Kirk Douglas was born on September 25, 1944, in New Brunswick, New Jersey, the son of one of the most recognizable faces in American cinema. His father was Kirk Douglas, Spartacus, champion of the blacklisted, a man whose jaw alone seemed to contain the entire ambition of post-war Hollywood. Growing up in that shadow would have crushed most people. Michael spent a good portion of his early life trying to figure out who he was when he wasn't someone's son. His parents divorced when he was young, and he shuttled between his mother, Diana Dill, a Bermudian actress of genuine grace, and his father, who was by then a global star with very little time for the quieter business of parenthood. Michael attended the University of California, Santa Barbara, where he studied drama and began to find, slowly and on his own terms, that he did, in fact, want to do what his father did. He broke onto television in 1972 as Inspector Steve Keller in the streets of San Francisco. 4 seasons of hard-boiled detective work opposite Carl Malden that made him a household name before Hollywood had properly sorted out what to do with him. But it was what he did off-camera during those years that revealed the shape of his ambition. He had acquired the rights to Ken Kesey's novel One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest from his father, who had played the lead on Broadway and desperately wanted to do the film. Michael was told repeatedly that it was unfilmable. He spent years proving that wrong. In 1975, the film won all 5 major Academy Awards: Best Picture, Best Director, Best Actor, Best Actress, Best Screenplay. One of only 3 films in history to achieve that sweep. Michael Douglas was 30 years old and had just produced the most decorated film of the decade. He hadn't even starred in it. The acting came next, with a force that the industry wasn't quite prepared for. Romancing the Stone in 1984 made him a genuine movie star, charming, roguish, capable of holding a frame with his own particular kind of magnetism that was different from his father's and entirely his own. But it was 1987 that defined him. In Oliver Stone's Wall Street, he played Gordon Gekko, the ruthless corporate raider whose philosophy, "Greed is good," became one of the most quoted lines in cinema history. It earned him the Academy Award for Best Actor. And then, released the same year, Fatal Attraction, a film about a man whose single act of infidelity spirals into something genuinely nightmarish. Both films made enormous amounts of money. Both films tapped into something anxious and specific about American life in the 1980s that no other actor was doing quite so precisely. Basic Instinct in 1992 cemented his reputation as the decade's most willing explorer of dangerous territory. It was controversial, provocative, and enormously successful. Michael Douglas was, through all of this, doing something that his father had never quite managed, building a career around complexity and moral ambiguity, around the question of what happens when a smart man makes bad choices and has to live inside those consequences. But his personal life was carrying its own weight. His first marriage to Deandra Luker in 1977 produced a son, Cameron, and lasted 23 years before ending in a divorce that cost him approximately $45 million, one of Hollywood's largest ever settlements. Through it all, he had the property in Mallorca, Cestaca, the 19th century estate he had purchased in 1990 for $3.5 million, which he and Deandra were forced to share on a 6 months each arrangement after the divorce. It was very uncomfortable, he told People years later. 6 months for each of us wasn't pleasant for anyone. The place he loved most had become a symbol of everything that had gone wrong. And then, in 1998, at a film festival in Deauville, France, everything changed. Michael had seen The Mask of Zorro at a private screening 3 weeks before the festival. He has described his reaction with a phrase that, in French, translates roughly as, "Good God." When he arrived at Deauville to support his own film, A Perfect Murder, he looked at the festival catalog, saw that Zorro was screening the following night, and asked his assistant to find out if Catherine Zeta-Jones was attending and whether she might have a drink with him. Now, to understand what Michael saw on that screen, you need to know where Catherine came from. She was born on September 25, 1969, in Swansea, South Wales, the daughter of a sweet factory owner and a seamstress. She was performing before she could explain why. She won a national tap dancing competition at 11. She quit school at 15 to join a touring production. By 17, she was on the West End in 42nd Street. By the early 1990s, all of Britain knew her from The Darling Buds of May. But Catherine wanted more than Britain could offer. Hollywood looked at her with skeptical patience. The pretty girl, the decoration. Then Steven Spielberg, unable to sleep one night, caught her on television and called a director named Martin Campbell, who was casting The Mask of Zorro. The rest arrived fast. The film, the sword fight, the screen presence that stopped people cold, including Michael Douglas. She was attending Deauville. She would have that drink. So they met. And then, over that drink in a hotel bar in Normandy, Michael Douglas told Catherine Zeta-Jones, with the particular confidence of a man who has survived decades of Hollywood and believes entirely in his own instincts, "You know, I'm going to be the father of your children." Catherine looked at him steadily and said, "I've heard a lot about you, and I've seen a lot about you, and I think it's time that I say good night." She said good night. He spent the rest of the festival regretting his timing and hoping for another opportunity. She was 25 years his junior, a Welsh girl from Swansea, with a career that was about to ignite. He was one of Hollywood's most decorated and complicated men, newly divorced and recently freed from the shared custody arrangement of a Mallorcan estate. They were, on the surface, a perfectly unlikely match. But they were engaged on New Year's Eve, 1999. They were married at the Plaza Hotel in New York City on November 18th, 2000, in a ceremony that cost an estimated £1.5 million and was described by the BBC as the wedding of the year. Their son Dylan had already been born in August 2000. Their daughter Karis followed in April 2003. And here is the detail that stops people every time they hear it. Michael Douglas and Catherine Zeta-Jones share the same birthday, September 25th. 25 years apart, born on the same day, on opposite sides of the Atlantic, in worlds that could not have been more different. A Hollywood dynasty in New Jersey, a sweet factory family in Swansea, and yet somehow finding each other in a hotel bar in Deauville at exactly the right moment. If a screenwriter had pitched that detail, someone would have told them it was too neat. The years that followed their marriage were not without difficulty. In 2013, they announced a trial separation, not a divorce, not a public war, just a quiet and honest acknowledgement that two strong-willed people who have each spent their lives in the spotlight sometimes need space to remember who they are individually. They reunited. They have not separated since. Catherine has spoken about the marriage with the matter-of-factness of a woman who knows exactly what she has chosen and why. But before the separation, before the reunion, there was 2010, and 2010 was the year that reset everything. Michael Douglas was diagnosed with stage 4 throat cancer, later clarified as tongue cancer, after experiencing symptoms that had been misdiagnosed for the better part of a year. The diagnosis was eventually made by a doctor in Montreal, of all places, after multiple American specialists had missed it. He began aggressive chemotherapy and radiation treatment. He lost 32 pounds. The treatment was brutal. Catherine was beside him through all of it, adjusting, adapting, managing 2 young children and a husband fighting for his life, while maintaining the outward composure that has always been one of her most remarkable qualities. By January 2011, the tumor was gone. "One thing is certain," Michael said afterward, "my cancer has made me a free man." He meant it in the way that serious illness makes people mean it, not in the glib sense, but in the sense that surviving something that enormous clarifies your relationship with time, with the people you love, and with the places that make you feel most yourself. Sestaka, by then fully his after he had bought out Deandra's share, was waiting. The estate sits on the northwest coast of Mallorca, between the bohemian village of Dea and the terraced heights of Valldemossa, at an elevation that catches the wind off the Serra de Tramuntana and holds it. It was built in 1867 by Archduke Ludwig Salvator of Austria, a Habsburg eccentric who acquired land across the Balearic Islands and developed them with an obsessive attention to their natural character. He built Sestaka for his mistress, a local woman, on a cliffside overlooking the sea, with terraces and olive groves, and a relationship to the Mediterranean that feels less like a view and more like a conversation. Michael paid $3.5 million for it in 1990. He then spent between 5 and 6 million euros renovating it across the following years, turning 7 separate buildings on the property into a coherent whole, with 10 bedrooms, 10 bathrooms, antique wood, copper, marble baths, a home cinema, a library, a gym, a spa, a vineyard, a wine cellar, and an outdoor kitchen. The property spans 250 acres and drops toward private access to the sea. Guests over the years have included Tom Cruise, Jack Nicholson, and Michelle Pfeiffer, people who arrived and then reportedly did not want to leave. Catherine has put her own imprint on the property in ways that go beyond the decorative. She has described herself as someone who picks up houses the way others collect art. She has a designer's instinct for how a space should feel and a gardener's patience for how a landscape should evolve. The olive trees that ring the estate have been cared for and tended. The terraces have been maintained with a reverence for the original character of the property that speaks to people who genuinely love what they have, rather than merely owning it. The main buildings are stone and timber, thick walls that hold the heat of the day and release it slowly into the evening. Floors are terracotta and antique wood. The living spaces are full of light in the Mediterranean way, where the quality of sunshine is itself a kind of furnishing. There are fireplaces for the evenings when the tramontana wind comes down from the mountains and makes the temperature drop faster than you expect. There are terraces for the mornings when the sea catches the early light and holds it. There is a pool positioned so that you can swim and watch the horizon at the same time. Michael has said more than once that he once joked he would be buried under the vines. It may not have been entirely a joke. The place has changed his relationship with time in ways that are visible to anyone who has seen him in recent years. He is 80 years old, and he is not slowed exactly, but deliberate, measured. The kind of man who has learned to let things arrive rather than sprint toward them. Catherine has been equally transformed by the rhythm of the island. She has spoken about the way Mallorca organizes a day. The mornings cool and clear, the afternoons long and warm, and suited to doing nothing particularly urgent. The evenings stretching in the way that Mediterranean evenings do, as if the light is reluctant to leave. She gardens, she cooks, she walks the property. She has described herself in interviews about her life there as genuinely happy in a way that does not require explanation or qualification. Their children, Dylan and Caris, visit regularly. Michael's daughter-in-law and grandchildren have been at Sestaca. The vineyard produces wine that they drink with dinner on the terrace. There is no red carpet at the end of the driveway. There are olive trees, dogs, the sound of the sea. Beyond the estate, both Michael and Catherine remain connected to causes that have shaped their later years. Michael has worked extensively with the United Nations as a messenger of peace, a role he has held since 1998, focused particularly on nuclear disarmament, an issue he has described as one of the defining challenges of the current century. He has participated in fundraisers for the Montreal Jewish General Hospital, where his cancer was diagnosed, and for the McGill University Health Center. He has spoken publicly about oral cancer awareness in ways that his doctors have credited with raising the profile of a disease that is frequently caught too late. Catherine, for her part, has channeled her philanthropic energy toward children's causes in Wales, particularly Swansea's Longfields Day Centre for the Disabled, to which she has made significant donations over the years. She has served as ambassador for the National Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Children, launched awareness campaigns for child abuse prevention in Wales, and been involved with the International Centre for Missing and Exploited Children. She was appointed Commander of the Order of the British Empire in the 2010 Birthday Honours, and in 2019 was given the Freedom of the City of Swansea, the coastal Welsh town that made her. Michael's net worth is estimated at around $350 million. Catherine's at approximately $150 million. Together, they represent one of the most substantial and durably earned fortunes in Hollywood, built not on a single franchise or a viral moment, but on decades of choosing the right material, producing projects that mattered, and never confusing fame with purpose. They still work. Michael has continued to find roles that challenge him, His portrayal of Benjamin Franklin in the Apple TV Plus series Franklin demonstrated that a man who once played Gordon Gekko still has the appetite and the range to disappear entirely into another life. Catherine has been equally selective and equally vital. Her ability to move between drama and comedy and musical theater without losing a step, a reminder that the girl who won a national tap dancing competition in Wales at 11 years old never stopped training. But the work is no longer the center. The center is Sestaka, and the long lunches on the terrace, and the grandchildren running between the olive trees, and the wine from the vineyard, and the view of the Mediterranean that Michael Douglas once said made him feel more himself than anywhere else he had ever stood. He fell in love with Catherine on this island. He has said so, directly and without embarrassment. Mallorca is where he met her, in the sense that Mallorca is where they became what they are to each other, away from the sets and the premieres and the noise that fame generates, in the long, unhurried evenings of a place that has been teaching people to slow down since 1867. Even if we leave, he has said, Mallorca will always be in our hearts and our lives. It's where I fell in love with Catherine. For that reason, the island means a lot to me, and I am already part of its history. He wasn't wrong. The history of Sestaka now includes them, two people from different worlds and different generations who found each other at a French film festival and built something that has outlasted every cynical prediction, every tabloid separation story, every question about whether a 25-year age gap can hold. It can. It has. And the proof is in the olive trees and the terrace and the sound of the sea, and in the fact that on any given summer afternoon in Mallorca, you might find Michael Douglas and Catherine Zeta-Jones sitting together in the long Mediterranean light, not performing for anyone, not chasing anything, just watching the water and choosing, as they have every year for more than 2 decades now, to be exactly where they are. If their story moved you, if it reminded you that love and stillness and the right place on earth are still the most valuable things money can find but never quite buy, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on those notifications. There is always another story worth telling. We will see you in the next one.